I've got for you here a little essay written by the Irish savant, I think, and it was pasted in by somebody. And at the end of the wonderful exposition on the situation we are in today up against cultural Marxism emanating from the elites, I provide what seems to be the unspoken response that many people must surely be thinking: eliticide. Okay, so have a little look at this little robot read video. I'm sure you'll agree with much of it if you enjoy watching my videos. If you're a thinking person and you're watching the news, you're watching politics, you're getting your own news off the internet. So have a little look at this. The subject is what can be done when 1 billion people are facing genocide. Okay?
Stuff you need to seriously consider, people. Irish savant, the truth a treasonous elite will not allow to be stated. And an appended solution, none other than eliticide. Here is what the Irish savant correctly describes as a brilliant exposition of the West's predicament that appeared as a comment by reader Dan O'Connor in The Spectator. Or at least it did. It's since been consigned to the ether. As per Rip Van Winkle, if you occupied what was considered the ideological/moral center ground in 1965, and went to sleep for 50 years and woke up in 2015, you'd find yourself occupying the ideological/moral far right. You didn't have to budge 1 inch ideologically to find yourself there. The whizzing sound you heard was the ideological/cultural center ground zooming over to the cultural Marxist hard left. Everything that was considered mainstream, obvious, common sense, logical and moral in 1965 is now considered by our political, academic and media elite to be bigoted, ignorant, hateful, xenophobic, racist, extremist and some form of moral abnormality. In other words, within the space of 50 years, morality, right, wrong, evil, good, normal, obvious, extreme, sanity, truth, beneficial, dangerous and the instinct for group preservation, has been inverted and stood upside down, on its head. Never before in the entire course of human history has an entire culture, race, and civilization decided to hand over its lands, social capital, heritage and identities to competing and intruding alien cultures without a fight, and even worse, to evolve an ideology that morally justifies and glorifies it as proof of their moral supremacy. European man is in a civilizational death dance. I pasted Dan O'Connor's comment as a comment on Craig Murray's very liberal blog where, somewhat to my surprise, it was not only not deleted, but evoked several entirely civil responses, among them, a question from Herbie. Doesn't say anything about how all this came to be or why. I mean, is it a purposeful thing or just like natural entropy that just happens kinda thing? The answer to which, I believe, is this. The liberals would like you to believe that it is the result of a gradual process of public enlightenment. But given that the process ends in death of the West and the occupation of Europe by adherents of a medieval theocracy, it looks like either, number 1, proof that liberalism is a contagious mental disease, which if allowed to spread unimpeded will destroy any civilization it infects, or, 2, that the spread of liberal ideas and the destruction of the Western nations is a calculated policy of national genocide imposed by Western elites. Here's how the corporate interest humiliates Europeans who oppose to their own genocide. It's how Hitler demoralized the Jews. It works with anyone. Heap enough contempt upon them, and most people begin to hate themselves. Then they will docilely enter the cattle cars or invite the alien in to rape their daughter. The caption, roughly translated, those who oppose their own genocide are Nazi shit. It is the voice of Muddy Merkel calling for the extinction of her own people. Her father was a traitor who defected to Commie East Germany. Like father like daughter. But if the latter assumption is correct, what is the underlying reason for such a policy? The answer is the drive to globalize. The money power has always wanted total freedom to move goods to where prices are highest, labor where supply is tightest, production facilities where wages, working conditions, and environmental regulation are lowest. capital where it can be invested most profitably, and profits where taxes are the lowest or non-existent. All of these objectives are foiled by a genuinely democratic sovereign nation-state that makes serving the interests of its own citizens its prime function. Hence the need of the money power to destroy the nation-state, the process to begin with the most powerful states. Hence the psychological warfare to undermine the self-confidence and morality of the people of the West by the substitution of political correctness for Christianity. The results are now in evidence. The European people are being genocided by their own governments, their fertility deliberately repressed by state-funded abortion, no-fault divorce, and above all, kindergarten through university sex education, i.e., inculcation of the belief that the only sexual vice is reproduction. Europeans are to be replaced by people without troublesome ideas about the rights of man, free speech, the rule of law and all such obstructive crap. In future, the inhabitants of Europe will exist to serve the corporate interest or they will cease to exist altogether. So what is to be done about this slow genocide of the West, by its own elites? Few remedies seem strong enough medicine. The situation is dire. Killing the elites would seem a very good start. And to make being elite a distinct health hazard for successors. Of some note in all of the European Islamic terrorism, not one of the elite have been harmed. Not one politician. Not one banker. Not one billionaire. Not one of the Brussels EU government. Kinda strange, isn't it? All living in gated elitist communities while insisting common people should all integrate and share accommodation with the invaders. Elite movie stars like George Clooney advocating refugee invasion, but their own mansions are always locked and empty. J.K. Rowling's etc., and they just never get attacked, never. Eliticide is needed as it's the only way to halt the genocide of Europe. After all, they are genociding us. And it's only a few hundred or a few thousand dead. Just a small number of casualties would likely be asymmetrically successful. It is potentially very good value return, for a comparatively minuscule effort to change the course of history. This conversation needs to be raised all over the net. More follows this script read.
So there you have some eliticide suggested to relieve the situation where our criminal elites have declared war on the common people and in fact seemingly the entire human race. And the criminal banking system is seemingly consisting only of about 8,000 people in the world. They are threatening humanity with its very existence. Certainly I would say the Western world is a major plank in the survival of humanity. Without our sense of civilization and creativity, the world would be a much worse place to be. So we are well worth preserving for what we can still produce in the future. So how could you selectively do this? This thing that we really don't want to think about yet is looming and might become a reality, a necessity for all of us simply to survive so that our grandchildren have a place to live with a decent living standard. So we have to sort of face this. It's a wonderful thought experiment we can all do. We can all run in the background while we're watching internet politics and the developments around the world. One thing you can do with your excellent news feeds, which you get from all over the place, you can learn a lot of lessons from people who don't know what they're doing. Typically all the jihadis, the silly people who seem to be of feeble-minded and of a criminal nature, who plan all their schemes on Facebook with everyone reading about it, and members of the public simply ring up the government 1-800 number and dob them in. And the police have been watching them all along, and they plan their scheme to blow up something, or attack some people, say at the Anzac Day parade in Melbourne, that sort of thing. We've had all that here in Australia. They plan the whole thing on monitored cell phones, for goodness sake. They do it for months and months. And they're so surprised when they get arrested by the police at 5 o'clock in the morning. Oh, for goodness sake, what happens to these people? Are they that feeble-minded? So there's a lot of pointers in the news about what not to do. If you want to do away with bankers without being caught in this wonderful thought experiment, you would avoid using the internet to announce your intentions. You would avoid using a cell phone, wouldn't you? In case you don't know, cell phones are monitored two different ways. One of them is that the telephone exchange itself polls your phone every half hour or so to find out where it is, because it's got to send ring current to wherever you are on the planet. So you are continually tracked through your switched on cell phone. The other one is, I got a real surprise from Google Maps the other day. They said to me, guess what we've got for you? We've got a wonderful surprise for you. We've got a compendium of all the journeys you've taken in the last 2 years using your cell phone as a GPS map reader. And they said, you can now reminisce about your wonderful trips and journeys around the great city of Sydney. All presented on a page for me, to my utter surprise. And they said down the bottom, of course, you are the only person who's ever going to see this. Oh, for goodness sake, they lie. They lie, don't they lie? This information wouldn't be for sale to anybody else, would? Goodness gracious. So that's how monitored we all are in this modern day and age. If you want to do anything dubious, you've really got to get off the grid and use your brain. The most interesting thing I've noticed about the European terrorist campaign is that not one member of the power pyramid in Europe has been attacked, not one politician, not one member of EU, Brussels, Parliament or anything like that, or the unelected, all the former prime ministers on massive salaries who just give orders and are not responsible or accountable to anybody else. Not one of them has been attacked by jihadis. Now, it's kind of strange, isn't it? Where jihadis only attack insignificant, unimportant, anonymous people, like little old ladies and priests in churches and that sort of thing. And you go, it's utterly pointless. It really has no political benefit at all. So what are these jihadis actually doing, or are they allowed to do? Why are they not encouraged to do more damage to the power pyramids of Europe? Clearly, the terrorism is an instrument of the elites. We can see that a mile off. When a whole lot of people disappear, taken away in ambulances from these alleged truck crash scenes, and you can't find out ever what happens to these people. So it's highly suspicious whether any of this terrorism is genuine, or a lot more is added on with dummies thrown under trucks for photographic purposes, and they do fake disaster scenes in advance of these alleged shootings. So we're not sure what to believe about that, are we? There is an Illuminati banker. I'll put a link to his beautiful video. Ronald something or other. I'll put his name on screen right now. I'll give you a link below this video. And he describes how he was a bright young businessman recruited by the elite bankers of the world. And they just said, you'll have to put your conscience in a deep freeze. And we're serious about that. We mean minus 100 degrees. And he was able to do it for about 5 years. And he spent his whole life, he says, it's a very graphic interview, by the way, well worth watching. And then I've got another one by another Illuminati banker, Whistleblower. But this Ronald fellow, he describes how at the 25th minute into the interview, he talks about one of the things he got to do after he graduated and achieved a level of acceptance among his peers, laundering money and all that sort of stuff, and organising money supply to terrorism and starting wars and all sorts of things, attacks on foreign currencies, blah, 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 all that stuff, money laundering for organised crime. He was invited to attend child sacrifice rituals, you see. That was the first thing that upset him. And there were other things. He came to realise there was a very strong Zionist influence, and he ultimately concluded he had a near-death experience which changed him because he got so sick, because his conscience began to escape from the freezer. He describes it rather graphically. And he came to the conclusion that what motivates the criminal Illuminati banking system is pure hate of all things human. So you are the enemy, you see. It's quite fascinating to listen to what he learned, how he got there. and how he was physically tortured to remind him. They knew he was going bad, becoming unreliable. He was physically tortured to remind him that he was lucky to be alive, as far as I can tell. Anyway, he's still alive today to do the interview. He's a Dutchman, and it's well worth listening to and pondering on how he's a lucky one to escape. Do you remember a couple of years ago, it was noticed by a number of watchers that top bankers were dying strange deaths all around the world? Well, he explains that it seems to be happening when they go bad. They turn to drugs and alcohol to salve their consciences for the criminal things they're doing. And there's a point where that doesn't work anymore. You become a liability to the criminal elite, the criminal overworld that runs our banking system. And so you have to die a strange death. So do you remember the Vatican banker that died? Was it on Wapping Steps on the bank of the River Thames? Hanged himself from a lamppost or something like that? There was a lot of other bankers who died strange deaths soon after that. It went on for a couple of years. It's probably going on regularly to just dispose of people who go bad in their job and become a threat to the oligarchy. Okay? So you can amuse yourself, run it in the background while you're thinking about so many other things. How might you dispose of bankers using roadside IEDs made from fertiliser and that sort of stuff? I'm sure white people could do a better job. You could notice how the IRA used to go after the power pyramid. They did seriously attempt to kill members of the royal family and British politicians. Totally different psychology, a more intelligent move than the jihadis ever do, who really are just harassing street people. Huge difference in mindset and mentality. Maybe we need to bring back the IRA or a modern day version of it with basically the war cry, stop the genocide of the white Western world. A most worthy cause it would be. This is certainly a wonderful thought experiment to pursue, isn't it? One thing that occurred to me was that Paul Joseph Watson has said he's getting bombarded with young people around the world saying they're growing up being conservative because it's the only counterculture way to go against the system which has been totally infiltrated and by left-wing forces, Marxist forces. So political correctness and all that crap and letting foreign refugees come and stay in your own house and all that stuff, they utterly reject it. Because the elites don't do it themselves. Paul Joseph Watson has pointed that out very ably. He gets dozens and dozens of emails daily. He's got 1 billion views on YouTube, and he's a leader of young people. And the new counterculture is conservatism, plain common sense, which has been utterly eradicated from the minds of young people previous to this. Certainly the people in our government, our elites, don't seem to have common sense anymore with transgenderism and all that tripe. What could be done to encourage the counterculture to grow and develop, to become a thorn in the side of the left-wing Marxist establishment? Well, it did occur to me that perhaps, I don't know, tell me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's ever been a computer game, an online computer game where you shoot bankers. Has that ever been invented? Would that appeal to young counterculture people, where you literally teach people about banking and what it does and where it started, what ethnic groups are involved, and how to eliminate them? If you got inside the building with, so many rounds in your magazine, what could you do? That sort of thing. Young men love war game sort of things. I'm wondering, can you let me know if there is such a game, as it could be invented? We could make a fortune here. What do you think? What a collaboration this could be. So in this wonderful ongoing thought experiment that the great Albert Einstein used to do to avoid true experimentation, you could sit there pondering all the different ways of dealing with troublesome people, such as the Russians have a tendency to poison their KGB defectors with polonium, don't they? That sort of thing. Russians are famous for dealing with dissident people with poisonings. They're supposed to be the world experts in doing that. Then there's light plane crashes, which kill all the Democrat politicians in America. There's improvised explosive devices for taking on cars as they drive around in their rich vehicles, right? So you can ponder all these wonderful things. You can jail them, put them in psychiatric wards. That's been done in Gulag countries. We know all about that, don't we? So there's quite a few ways of dealing with people that you don't like. And I still keep coming back to the small number of people causing all this heartache for humanity. It's said to be 8,000 people only are doing this. So it's certainly something to consider. And another problem would be, even if you could wave a magic wand and eliminate them all tomorrow, their seats would be immediately filled with wannabe replacements instantly. There must be a queue to get into their positions. Even though suicide or murder is likely the end of your career there, when you pass your use-by date and you start refusing assignments, they know you're going bad and you may not make it home, that sort of thing. So people are willing to take that risk because they're so crazy to get into the peak of the power pyramid that controls everything on the planet. It looks like world domination appeals to a lot of people deep down. So I'm not sure whether taking them out in mass attacks or even small attacks one at a time at home would really achieve any lasting change. I'm not sure. All you'd be reading about is more bankers dying mysterious deaths at best, and I think they'd be instantly replaced. So what's a solution while you're pondering all these wonderful ways of disposing of the criminal banking system? What's something else you could do? So what else might you do while you're considering all this murder and mayhem done very quietly without being caught, that sort of thing? And there's wonderful permutations to consider, and whether it would have any lasting effect to raise the death rate of Illuminati bankers. Well, there is something you can do, because born out of the banking crisis in 2008 was something wonderful, a dissident, rebellious, revolutionary new currency. It's called Bitcoin, B-I-T, Bitcoin. It began in 2008 at the height of the crisis when, do you remember, the hedge funds were falling like dominoes all around the world, and it all started in America, where people were being given massive mortgages to, even without jobs, to buy homes. And strangely, you could just wriggle out of a mortgage in America just by putting the key in an envelope and posting it to the local bank. So those debts were sold as credit debt swaps and ended up in large quantities in hedge funds around the world. And the end result was bank after bank toppled around the world. And do you remember there were all these crazy things like British pension funds were being found missing from Iceland and things like that? Do you remember that? It went right around the world. Countries you'd never heard of were involved in this domino banking crash. And do you know what saved the world from that 2008 banking crash? It was black money, criminal money, organised crime money. $300 billion was donated by organised crime into the last bank, the last domino, to stop it falling over and taking the world banking system with it. So organised crime caused that crisis. Organised crime corrected it, okay, and we're still paying for it today, and Deutsche Bank have been fined $14 billion and they haven't paid it yet. So that's Angela Merkel's business, right? So Bitcoin is greatly attractive to people like your good self, bright people who watch these style of videos. You think a little bit about money and where does it come from, who makes it, where does it come from. The money control of the banking system is caused by the monopoly on the printing of money. I'm sure you all know about that. You're all experts on that. Bitcoin is not produced by banks. It's not produced by governments. Bitcoin is produced It's basically money as a result of work. It's stored up work, potential to do work if it's spent, okay? And it's not dispensed by governments, doesn't have to be paid back to any Federal Reserve, that sort of thing. It's minted by the work of people and basically isolated from banks and governments. So now I'll give you a clue. The first thing in 2008 that was bought with a Bitcoin was rather hilarious. It was a pizza bought for 10,000 Bitcoin. Thus it was worth less than a cent per Bitcoin, right? Today, just 2 weeks ago, it was worth $2,100 Australian. Okay, so if you'd invested a few $100s way back in, say, 2009, you would be a millionaire by now. Okay, now, it's not too late to get on the bandwagon. I'm doing some paper trading now, and I've got some friends in an investment club, and it's kind of fascinating to see Bitcoin is an online money-making, it's just a new currency that you can use to buy things. And it's got big enough now that it's now been declared a legal currency in Japan in all shops, okay? In Australia, it becomes a legal currency on July the 1st. And guess what? It's income tax free. They're actually trying to get people to be entrepreneurial and spend money through Bitcoin doing things to try and boost the economy to another level of activity. The good news is this is common people's money, common people's activities generating Bitcoin money, supply and demand regulating the value of it. Just doing some paper trading with my friends in the club. They were telling me all the numbers, and I was doing a demo bit of software to see what I could make on it. And if you just sit there and buy Bitcoin, BTC is the symbol, you put it in an online coin jar and you just wait for the price to go up. It's been going up at an accelerated rate since Donald Trump was elected. But over 3 Sundays, the price went from $2,100 Australian to $2,300 the following Sunday. And by the second Sunday, or should I say the third Sunday, that's 2 weeks later, it was $2,500. So if I bought Bitcoin a fortnight previously, I could have made $500 Australian, which is pretty good for sitting on your backside, isn't it? Not bad for doing absolutely nothing. In fact, it's nearly as good as a job. Invest a bit more money and you could replace your job, couldn't you? So it's worth looking at it for that purpose. So how do you... So here we go. How do you find out about Bitcoin? Well, you start watching one video per day, perhaps 2 videos, if you're very clever. Have a scratch pad, write down these keywords such as Bitcoin, BTC. That's the leading digital currency currently. There's other ones, less well known, such as Ethereum, Litecoin, Perfect Money. There's a few of them, and new ones are being generated, okay? So have a scratch pad, write down keywords, start watching 1 Bitcoin video a day. I'll give you a clue. In the club that I'm currently doing paper trading with, there's some of my good friends are making $100 a day, okay, that's for a $5,000 investment, okay? It's a high-risk investment, but you keep your fingers crossed and hope you get your capital back in 3 weeks or something, 4 weeks. And after that, anything else you get is a benefit, okay? So that's their philosophy. So this investment club is a little bit like a gambling club, okay? But it's well worth doing, and the leader of the club is making $1,000 per day by sitting on his backside, okay? So that's worth thinking about, isn't it? And that's all done with Bitcoin. I'll tell you how to do this, by the way. Another keyword you need to know is blockchain. Learn about that, blockchain. And that is an internationally spread all over the internet, decentralized database of Bitcoin transactions. Okay? Rothschilds are buying into that, so it must be good. So, you can get an online account, and you have to identify yourself and your online account, your CoinJar account, which is just literally like a local coin jar in your particular country. has to be attached to a legal bank account. You might open a bank account just for that. So you can move money out into your bank account. But the coin jar people in your local country will give you a swipe card so you can get cash out of vending machines, out of ATM machines. Okay, now, so you could buy, say, half a Bitcoin and just sit and watch it in your coin jar, and its sell price goes up and up and up. You could buy a quarter of a Bitcoin and just watch the price go up and up and up. To invest that money somewhere else on the internet, or just send it to another person for free, all you need is a unique number that's only used for one transaction from the other person, and you sell it out of your own coin jar account. Okay, you say pay this unique number, which could be a person anywhere on the internet. Okay, it's purely for internet use, this. So you can move money around the world for free instead of going to expensive money transfer agencies or banks. Now, it's not very hard to get your head around this. You do it gradually over a daily basis. Just watch one video a day. And the knowledge is proliferating, and in January the 1st, as you were, July the 1st in Australia, it becomes a legal currency in shops, okay? So you might start seeing two prices and everything. I'll let you know about that. You see dollars and you'll see a Bitcoin price. So that's very interesting, isn't it? Now, this is how you can get back at the bankers. While you're considering roadside IEDs, mass poisoning and all that sort of stuff, you can quietly make inroads against the bank with a new type of citizens' money, where it's not controlled by banks, not issued by banks. And you can make money outside the banking system, with more risk, of course, but you never get anywhere if you don't take some risks. You have to think about that. Your degree of risk you've got to decide for yourself. I hope I've given you a lot to think about. The evil of the money system is becoming more and more manifest. It's probably been responsible for all the warfare in the last 20th century, which has cost humanity grievously. I'm sure you know that the benefits during wartime are 10 to 20 times higher than peacetime, so the banking system never really wants peace. So how do you beat the banking system? Well, you can try this new citizen money of Bitcoin and make a modest investment and just watch the price go up, or actually go and invest it somewhere, take a little bit of a risk, become a small investor. But you can also use it as currency if you're sending money to people in the old country, if you're a migrant somewhere. It's a way to move money for free, simply between internet accounts. Point to point. It's peer-to-peer money transfer with no institutions, third parties involved. Can you see how it gives you independence from the big bricks and mortar companies that want to control your life and get you ready for the next war? Or your children. Okay, I hope I've given you a lot to think about, but you can also work on the computer games about killing bankers and the roadside IEDs, mass poisoning, mass shooting, all that sort of stuff, right? So we'll work on this together, guys. See you next time.